Hi, I'm Niall, and this is NZCS Tactical Gaming's When Do We Go From Here? Recap. Season 1, which we didn't record, is going to be me explaining to you what happened in our first season. The original setting of our game was to be 2087 Seattle Shadowrun universe. Our characters were looking for work separately. They didn't know each other. They each received a message to come to a local bar. The local bar was McLennan's. When they arrived, they could see on the reader board above the bar, McLennan's. And strangely enough, in a mix of letters, probably not ones that are supposed to be used, it read, "Stop stealing my letters," with a reply below that said no. Also on this block, next door, was Helga the Wrench mechanic shop, as well as several other businesses such as Mama Panda's Noodles to Go, and I believe there was a small cupcake shop also. Our characters arrived to meet Vordath McLennan behind the bar. He was a rather tall man of indeterminate race. They didn't know exactly what he was. They just kind of knew he was big and, just to be honest, ugly. He was missing an eye. He was 8 feet tall, plus 2 more feet of mohawk. Rather imposing man. He wore a kilt, which was odd, because this overall 10-foot tall man contrasted with the group of goblins and orcs. Just a couple of them, sitting at a table across the room. They too were wearing kilts. The party didn't really think much of this, but walked across, found a table, and Vordath, as they came in, seated them all together. He spoke to them and said that he understood that they were all looking for work, and if they were interested, he could provide them steady income and a steady flow of jobs to do to earn their income. Allow me to describe our characters. First off, the largest, loudest, smelliest, Oni. Oni was a troll. 10 feet tall. Had to duck to go through doorways, that kind of guy. He was a mechanic. And he was good at it. We had Varys, who was the faceman of the group. His tools were style, intimidation, and his charisma. We had Bob, who was a dwarf. Your regular gunman. His friend, of whom, I have to be honest, I can't remember his name. You'll understand why later. Who was also a gunman. We had Krombopolis, who is human. He was a rigger. He handled vehicles. He handled drones, albeit not so well. And we had another young man who had to depart the group, and I honestly can't remember his character's name. But, needless to say, they sat in the bar waiting for their first mission. As they were in Everett, Washington, right on the piers, the local gang who idolized their friend Vordath was a rather large man, approximately 8 feet tall, crowned by another 2 feet of mohawk, starting at black, going to white. He was of an indeterminate race. Our group couldn't quite figure out what he was. As they were a mix of different races, it didn't really matter to them. But he was tall and muscular. He had a scar on his face and an eye patch. He was missing an eye. He wore a kilt, matching that of a few goblins and orcs that sat across the room at a table of their own, minding their own business. Vordath approached our group and explained to them that he had called them there because he knew that they were looking for work, and he had odd jobs that needed to be taken care of for his employer. The first job that he suggested they go out on was a job for the local gang, a test run to see how they handled things. It seemed that the local gang, our goblins and orcs, were living in the sewers. Not really the sewers, the storm drains of the local area. And explained that of recent, there had been strange occurrences happening. Swarms of bugs, evil clowns, ghosts, everything else trying to force them out of where they lived. And they were in fear because they were a superstitious bunch. Our group decided they were going to go into the sewers, the storm drains, and investigate what was happening and possibly help this group out. The next morning at low tide, they went down next to the pier nearby, where the storm drain was an outlet to the sea, and they went inside. It didn't take them long before they were walking down one of the inlets, and out of nowhere came a swarm of every insect you can think of. Vile, disgusting, dangerous, poisonous, creepy, crawly, all of them came running at our heroes. There was panic, there was shooting, there was total inability to comprehend what was going on. But they didn't run away. One of them did get a little bit traumatized by it while it was happening, but they managed to keep him calm and on focus. They went a little farther. What they didn't know is they were headed straight towards the lair of what was creating these things. And as they got closer, it projected upon them more terrors. The next wave of terror that came at them was clowns with knives. This caused them to go into panic also. There was gunfire. There was panic and confusion, especially after these clowns passed through them and went on down the storm drain. Our party still persevered and moved on until they came to a small room, a access area, if you please. And they found 2 adults and 2 children. The adults weren't doing well. They were ill. One of the children was trying to tend to them. The other was yelling at them to leave. This child is the one who was creating the illusions that were coming after these characters of ours. And thus, they completed their first task. Doesn't seem like much. I get that. So then they go back to the bar. They find this family, this homeless family that had moved into the sewers and was being defended by the young child who had abilities beyond his age to create illusions to try to scare people away. And he was using what scared him to try to scare the people off. And he successfully scared the gang members out of the sewers. Now, let it be known that these gang members aren't troublemaker gang members. They were just local youths of non-human races that they didn't have a home of their own. They were also homeless. But they were making their way, and they were working also for Vordath the next night at McLennan's. They came in, they sat at their table. There was over at the side of the bar a large booth that was marked as reserved. Partway through the evening, a security force from the building across the street walked across and posted themselves outside. Moments later, from across the street, a gentleman wearing a rather nice suit and a woman walked over. As they came in the door, our party could see that this gentleman was Japanese. The woman with him was half elf. She wore a plaid skirt and a nice white shirt. There seemed to be another woman walking along with them who was their secretary. They could note this because he was dictating some information to her and she was jotting it down. A little bit later, another security officer came from across the street. This one looked a little bit different than the others, and he walked in, came straight over to the table, which was a reserved booth at the side of the bar, and sat down with them. And shortly after he came in, another young lady came in. He and this young lady seemed to be of mixed origins. They looked like they had a little bit of elf in them. They looked like they had a little bit of Japanese. It became obvious to our group that this was actually the children of the couple that was sitting there. Vordath walked over and asked the group for their drink orders, bowed to them. But they spoke a weird language. Our group could speak Japanese, but they weren't speaking Japanese. Our group could speak many of the languages that were present in that area for that time. But this seemed almost like an archaic version of an offshoot of Japanese. They could understand a word here and there, but they couldn't really get the gist of the conversation. Suddenly, on the other side of the room, with a flash, a small female demon appeared, wings and all. And she trotted 2 steps and then leapt and glided over to the booth and sat down. Oddly enough, nobody found this strange at all. She sat down with the gentleman dressed as a security officer in full body armor. They sat, they talked. The secretary was the first to stand and leave. And then our group decided to send somebody across to greet these people, to talk to them. I don't remember the details of the conversation, but two of our people got up and walked over. And when Crom immediately jumped into crass conversation and disrespectful greetings, with a wave of the hand of the gentleman in the suit, his mouth disappeared. Varys, taking the opportunity, bowed deeply, gave his salutations, and they introduced themselves. The Japanese gentleman was Kurabara Nagoyaka. He was the president and CEO of the Kurabara Group, as well as their holdings. His wife, Krista. Son Kugan, daughter Katina. And of course the young demon woman was Nadia, Kugan's wife. They finished their greetings and all had their drinks. When Nagoyaka got up and left, he went out in the back of the bar, left through the back door. And our group could see the security detail leave as a limousine pulled out and down the street. The last to leave was Katina. She stood, walked to the door, and when she was about halfway across the street, a group of gentlemen in business suits pulled up and a fight ensued. There was flashes of gunfire, blades. The sheer numbers of them managed to subdue her and put her in a car, and it drove off. Our heroes tried to go to the rescue, but didn't make it in time. Very shortly after this, the police showed up, and our heroes attempted to send up a drone to see what was going on. And then Crom simply rolled really bad, a lot. And every time he set up a drone, it would crash. Crom spent most of his time fixing drones. The next day, they were being asked to go surveil a rival business's CEO's home. To their benefit, they found a house next door that was up for sale, so it didn't have residents. But when Crom decided to send up a drone and it crossed over into one of the property lines, the home defenses against such invasions of privacy sent an EMP out and fried the drone. As I said, Crom couldn't seem to keep a drone in the air for his life. They got into the home and they were able to glean some information before they were called and told that they needed to return to McLennan's with the information they had. And they did. They gathered a lot of information. When they got back to Vordath, they passed the information on. They were thanked. And that was that. Vordath informed them that they seemed to be doing okay, and they would definitely be a welcome addition to the operations that he directed from the bar. And they were paid fairly well.